The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 353. Chicken Game. Part 1. The communication was cut off. Count Gomez, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke in a tense voice. The opponent is Roman Dmitri. If he says he'll keep pushing forward, it's definitely not an empty threat. I know that too. It was an absurd predicament. With just 100,000 men, they were preparing to confront the massive army of Valhalla. Moreover, the Kronos army gathered at the Cairo border were eagerly waiting for the right moment to strike. Marquis Belfer couldn't understand where Roman Dimitri's confidence stemmed from. If the opponent had been anyone else, he would have dismissed those words as nonsense. Damn it, Roman Dmitri. He hurled the magic telegram device to the floor, shattering it upon impact. But as if that wasn't enough to calm his anger, Marquis Belfer stomped on the broken pieces before taking a deep breath. Count Gomez. What do you think will happen if we leave Roman Dmitri alone? I don't think even Roman Dmitri could push all the way to the capital with just 100,000 troops. If he comes in that deep and the imperial forces cut off his retreat, Dmitri will be surrounded by 1 million soldiers with no escape. But that doesn't mean he won't do anything. Roman Dmitri has already shown a clear precedent in the war with the Kronos Empire. The guerrilla tactics that captured Rascal and Cortes proved how he emerged as a new powerhouse between the two empires, even when overwhelmingly outnumbered. That day, the entire continent was left in shock. With every move Roman Dmitri made, people questioned whether he was even human. Our situation is no different. If Roman Dmitri sweeps through the north with guerrilla tactics, even with only 100,000 troops, the damage Valhalla will suffer will be tremendous. Marquis Belfer, we must act. The Kronos Empire underestimated Roman Dmitri, and it cost them dearly, a disastrous defeat followed by the humiliation of ceasefire negotiations. If Valhalla repeats that mistake, Roman Dimitri's growing influence could become a threat to both empires. Marquis Belfer nodded in agreement. Even after mobilizing Kronos, if Roman Dmitri refused to back down, they couldn't afford to leave him unchecked. We have no plan, nor strategy. Even Kronos, their ultimate trump card, had failed. But he didn't want to be swayed by the opponent's will. After pacing his office for a while, swallowing his anger, Marquis Belfer came to a conclusion. It seems we must meet His Majesty, the Emperor. Marquis Belfer despised the thought of meeting the indolent emperor, but he had no other choice. Valhalla had an unspoken taboo. Asking the emperor for anything he did not desire often led to dire consequences. As expected, after hearing the situation, the emperor of Valhalla looked at Marquis Belfer with cold eyes. Marquis Belfer. Yes. Smack. His head jerked violently to the side. As he quickly straightened himself, the emperor's cold voice rang out once more. Marquis Belfer. Yes. Smack. Repeated blows left blood dripping from the Marquis's nose. Even though the emperor's weak hand had left his face swollen, Marquis Belfer tried not to show any reaction. Showing weakness only provoked the emperor's anger further. Like a disciplined recruit, he stood at attention, head bowed. Years of learned fear had taught him how to endure violence. After about 10 slaps, the emperor finally calmed, rubbing his wrist as he spoke. You worthless worms. You both know very well that I gave you power so you wouldn't bother me. If you handle things like this, why should I trust either of you? We're sorry. Yes, you should be sorry. The emperor started circling around the frozen Marquis Belfer and Count Gomez. Then, he spoke in a sharp tone. You know, I don't really like those born in Valhalla. Those who shout about the romance of warriors or traditions never face reality. It was the same on the day I took the throne. Those who stubbornly clung to talk of legitimacy all met their end by my hand. People often said that Valhalla was divided into 2 eras, before and after the reign of the current emperor. When the previous emperor was alive, Valhalla was filled with the romance of warriors, but when the 14th son set his sights on the throne, everything changed. And Valhalla's sudden transformation was puzzling as well. Despite having no solid foundation, the elites rallied behind the 14th son, igniting a bloody storm. Those who followed the warrior's path and refused to bend were all killed. Thanks to that, Marquis Belfer rose to power. He, who was not recognized among the traditionalists, found prominence in this new era. Watching Roman Dimitri's actions reminds me of those times. Those who shouted that I wasn't the rightful heir, those who told me to follow imperial protocol. Roman Dimitri is a guy who has deeply inherited Valhalla's nature. A lowly frontier-born acting like a Valhalla warrior, knowing no fear. In a world where the strong preyed on the weak, Roman Dimitri was an apex predator. He was accustomed to devouring the weak, which is why the people of Valhalla were drawn to him. They felt a sense of kinship. In many ways, Valhalla mirrored the ways of the demonic cult. Suddenly, the emperor stopped in his tracks. Leaning in close to Marquis Belfer, he flashed a fanatical smile. If I don't respond to Dimitri's intentions, will he show up at my doorstep first, or will my army deal with the Hernard rebels and cut off Dimitri's retreat? Marquis Belfer couldn't answer. He held his tongue. He had painfully learned that a hasty reply could shorten their lives. Heh heh heh. The emperor resumed walking and soon took his seat on the throne. Looking down from above, he offered direction to the two lost nobles. I will not be swayed by Roman Dimitri's absurd provocations. Send troops to Hernard. Kill every last one of them without leaving a single survivor. Then, isolate and eliminate Roman Dimitri, just like those who oppose me. The Emperor of Valhalla was violent and cruel. Marquis Belfer knew this all too well. Yet, he sought the Emperor because only he could wield Valhalla's full strength. The Imperial army had swiftly seized control of the royal family. Without them, Valhalla's power was incomplete. We will obey your command. The next day, the Imperial army departed for Hernard. Simultaneously, their movements were swiftly reported to Roman Dimitri. Are you really planning to proceed with the plan? Chris asked. This operation was dangerous. If Dimitri chose to wage war against Valhalla, as Marquis Belfer had warned, the Kronos army stationed at Cairo's border could seize the opportunity to strike. Furthermore, if the Hernard rebels were swiftly crushed, there was a significant risk that Valhalla's forces would encircle them, cutting off any chance of retreat. After a moment of consideration, Roman Dimitri spoke. This is already a battle we can't turn back from. If we retreat now, the cost will be far greater than a single defeat. Ever since he cut off Count Bragan's head, the chicken game had begun. The Hernard rebels cannot succeed without our help. If their rebellion fails, those who harbor ill will toward Dimitri will maintain power in Valhalla. From then on, we would have to face both Kronos and Valhalla simultaneously. The mere fact that Kronos gathered troops at Cairo's border at Valhalla's request proves the possibility of an alliance between them. During the Valhalla festival, Roman Dimitri had already glimpsed the possibility of an alliance. Valhalla's willingness to turn a blind eye to Kronos' attack showed that the continent's two giants weren't always in opposition. Perhaps the dangerous chicken game had started back then. So when Count Bragan arrived, Roman Dimitri didn't believe their promises of a guaranteed future. To send a clear message, he sent back the Count's severed head. He had never intended to compromise with the Valhalla Emperor, who had already shown murderous intent toward him. Valhalla's civil war isn't just their problem. The continent's interests are at stake, and the loser will lose everything the moment one side backs down. Of course, if neither backs down, the damage won't be small. Even if Kronos declares a second continental war by crossing Cairo's border, what's important to us is to eliminate the danger called Valhalla first. It's not too late to deal with Kronos afterward. I understand, Chris said with a nod. While he worried about the worst-case scenario, he trusted Roman Dimitri's judgment. Their commander always employed the most aggressive tactics, yet consistently achieved the best results. Because of this, not a single soldier doubted Roman Dimitri, even during the bold act of crossing Valhalla's border. At the round table, Kevin, standing beside him, spread a map of Valhalla across the surface. With key locations marked, Roman Dimitri pointed to 3 specific points in succession. Tap, tap, tap. Runos, Port Bell, Santino. These are 3 territories on the shortest path to Valhalla's capital. Especially if we pass Santino, there's a warp point that allows us to travel throughout Valhalla, including the capital. Knowing the importance of these 3 places, Valhalla has built solid fortresses and deployed sufficient defensive forces. He had explained the plan before. But as he repeated it once more, the group's gazes sharpened in focus. If we can break through these 3 places within a week, then even Valhalla won't be able to ignore our presence. That afternoon, while standing atop the walls of his city, Viscount Runo spotted Dimitri's army approaching from afar. In the end, they've come. His expression hardened. He had received reports that Dimitri had destroyed the northern frontline defenses in just one day. He wanted to abandon Runos and join forces at fortresses like Santino, but orders came from above. What Roman Dimitri wants is for us to gather our forces. If we voluntarily combine battles that should be fought separately, he can gain a significant advantage with just one victory. Viscount Runos, hold your position. Even if we lose Runos, you won't be punished. But don't let the city fall in a single day. Even if you have to send all your soldiers to their deaths, if you can buy us a few days, you will be greatly rewarded. Despite the promise of a generous reward, Viscount Runos knew it was a reckless order. In essence, they were telling him to be ready to die to hold back the enemy. As Dimitri's army drew closer, Viscount Runos swallowed hard. Just a few days. If we can hold out for just a few days. The Valhalla royal family's intent was clear. If they could delay Dimitri's army as much as possible while he advanced through the northern territories, Hernard would inevitably fall. Once the Imperial army moved north through the warp point to cut off his retreat, the stage would be set to eliminate the arrogant Roman Dimitri. To achieve this, they ordered the Viscount to employ human wave tactics, a strategy of overwhelming the enemy with successive waves of soldiers, sacrificing numbers to wear them down. Even though the capital was still far away, if their progress was stalled at each territory, Dimitri would have no way forward. Viscount Runos raised his voice before the gathered soldiers. Do not let your guard down for even a moment. If the enemy shows the slightest sign of attack, unleash all your power. This is not a fight to win. Just 3 days. If we can hold out for about 3 days, our victory is guaranteed. The guards lined up along the walls widened their eyes, staring intently into the distance. But Dimitri's forces showed no movement. They dismissed it on the first day. As evening approached, it appeared the enemy army was simply resting in preparation for nightfall. But with Dimitri's army still unmoving on the second day, Viscount Runos grew curious. Could it be that they'd given up attacking? Well, that makes sense. Since the Valhalla royal family boldly sent troops to Hernard, even Roman Dimitri must realize it's impossible to achieve victory in time. No matter how great he is, there are limits to what can be achieved with only 100,000 troops within the Empire's territory. The Viscount was elated. Just one more day. If they could hold out for 3 days, he could eventually retreat and still earn a great reward. Don't let your guard down. The opponent is Roman Dimitri. But strangely, even as the sun set, Dimitri's army remained motionless. As night fell on the second day, Viscount Runos entered his bedroom with a sense of satisfaction. However, before he could settle into a peaceful sleep, a soldier interrupted him. Bang! Bang! Sir! We have big trouble. Don't tell me Dimitri has begun the attack? He jumped up. An attack in the middle of the night? As Viscount Runos hastily questioned him, the soldier spoke with a pale face. No, sir. The Dimitri army remains in place. But we've just received word that Port Bell is under attack. They've deceived us and are aiming to take down Port Bell. The Viscount was stunned. Only then did he realize that he had fallen for a diversion tactic. Port Bell was positioned behind Runos. Overnight, Roman Dimitri had thrown the Valhalla Empire into chaos. Chapter 354. Chicken Game. Part 2. A week had passed since meeting Sanchez. Roman Dmitry, preparing for war with Valhalla, was already considering the situation he might face after breaking through the northern front. Once we destroy the foremost defensive position on the northern front, the enemy will have two options. The first is to send troops to stop us. The second is to deal with Duke Vieto's rebel forces before turning their attention to us. Given the considerable size of the rebel force, they're likely to focus on one threat at a time. If they choose the latter, they'll likely use elements like the Kronos Empire to stall us. At that point, we'll target 3 key locations: Runos, Port Bell, and Santino. That's reckless. While we're dealing with those 3 places, Duke Vieto's rebellion will be suppressed. A valid point. But what if we can capture all 3 places within a week? Chris thought about his commander's suggestion. The distance between the northern front and the capital of Valhalla is immense. Even if our army took the shortest route, the march would take over a month. This is why the magical artifacts are so highly praised. After passing Santino, there's a warp point similar to Kronos Cortes. If we capture it, Valhalla will have no choice but to respond. Using the warp point's coordinates to open a gate, we could immediately launch an attack on the capital of Valhalla, bring reinforcements from Dmitry to Valhalla, or, if we're willing to abandon our justification, cross over to Hernard to support Duke Vieto's rebels. This makes Santino a territory they cannot afford to lose. The moment it falls, they will undoubtedly send troops through the warp gate to block us. Considering it would take at least a week for the Imperial army to reach Hernard, capturing Santino first could shift the momentum in our favor. The challenge is that this leaves us with a very tight schedule. Roman Dmitry might have claimed he'd capture all 3 territories in succession, but just moving between them would consume almost an entire week. We would need to capture 1 territory per day to succeed. Recognizing these concerns, Roman Dmitry began outlining his strategy to capture the 3 territories. First, we'll move our forces near Runos. By establishing a base at a certain distance, the Valhalla Empire will focus on the visible forces, thus reducing the defenses of the other 2 territories. At that time, we will infiltrate the second territory, Port Bell, and bring it down. That's too dangerous. Ever since the operation at Rascal, both empires have become highly cautious of guerrilla tactics used by small groups. They must have prepared countermeasures, Chris said once more. It was a valid point. The incident at Rascal had sent shockwaves through the continent. The fact that Roman Dmitry entered Rascal alone and massacred 10,000 troops forced the 2 empires to mobilize their brightest minds to devise countermeasures. They couldn't afford to suffer the same fate again. A reckless infiltration now could easily lead the army to falling into the traps they've set. After a moment of silence, Roman Dmitry looked at Lucas. "Lucas, are you ready to attack Port Bell?" At those words, Lucas smiled. "Yes, everything is ready." From then on, Roman Dmitry's plan picked up speed. On the day Valhalla attempted the assassination, Roman Dmitry designated Valhalla as an enemy. Anticipating that war with them would eventually break out, he gave Lucas various orders. One of them was to plant spies across Valhalla. "Valhalla is in chaos right now. While trying to assassinate me, conflicts have arisen among those who represent the foundation of Valhalla. Use this chaos to infiltrate as many people from the Information Guild as possible. The roles of the informants should be as diverse as possible: ordinary people who can incite others, combat professionals who can influence enemy operations in emergencies, and so on. Do it thoroughly. I'll give you everything you need." Understood. The operation proceeded steadily. When Duke Vieto declared rebellion, it was members of Hauman who strengthened their claims. They encouraged those who were cautious of the Emperor of Valhalla to raise their voices. And it was the same during Ares' challenge. To prevent the Valhalla Empire from pulling any tricks, they rallied the people. After defeating Caesar, they sided with those expressing anger. Under Roman Dmitry's orders, they intentionally created these situations. In his previous life, people said, didn't the heavenly demon, Junghik Bek, rise to that position solely through overwhelming power? To some extent, their words were true. If he didn't have power, he couldn't have achieved the feat of conquering Murim. However, lacking the political acumen to navigate the treacherous path from the bottom would have ensured his downfall long before that. Roman Dmitry never considered his actions cowardly. Creating advantageous situations was a crucial skill for any commander. Thus, everything was meticulously planned from the very beginning. Since Santino was the last gateway and heavily guarded, they couldn't infiltrate as soldiers. However, the situation was different for Port Bell. As the sun set and darkness enveloped the land, informants who had infiltrated Valhalla long ago under Dmitry's orders began to move stealthily. They took advantage of the soldiers who had settled in for the night. Changing shifts already. MHM? Thud. The guards were assassinated in an instant. Dressed as familiar soldiers and bearing recognizable faces, the infiltrators caught them off guard and launched a sudden, lethal attack. The operation proceeded swiftly. Dozens of informants quickly subdued the guards around the castle gate and immediately manipulated the gate. The creaking sound of chains moving was silenced by a silent scroll. They hurriedly sounded the alarm as the gate began to lower, but it had already descended over the moat, sealing their fate. Rumble. Beyond the gate, they saw the enemy rushing in urgently. Led by Roman Dmitry, his elite forces stormed into the castle, overwhelming the defenders. Kill them all. Enemies. The enemy has appeared. Soldiers, abruptly awakened from deep sleep, rushed out, their faces shifting from confusion to alarm as they grasped the unfolding situation. Flames erupted, engulfing the surroundings. In the scorching heat, Roman Dmitry suddenly appeared, massacring the soldiers of Port Bell. Arg! Spare me! It was a hellish pandemonium. Just avoiding the scorching heat proved challenging, but the soldiers found themselves even more helpless against Roman Dmitry's overwhelming force. Not even the knights of Port Bell were spared. They raised their auras and charged at Dmitry. But one by one, their limbs were severed, and their bodies rolled lifelessly on the ground. The commander of Port Bell, Baron Port Bell, shouted at the top of his lungs with a pale face. Activate the magic system. Don't panic. The enemy is few in number. Rain shower. Rain shower. Rain shower. Magic circles activated everywhere. Rain shower was a magic excellent for firefighting. Having discovered that the flames used by Roman Dmitry during the Rascal incident were hard to extinguish, the Valhalla Empire embedded powerful magic into their fortresses. It was certainly effective. No matter how formidable the flames were, they weren't omnipotent, and the magic specialized in firefighting had the effect of extinguishing the flames. They didn't fall for the same tricks, nor did they share the same fate as others. Those who viewed Dmitry as their enemy analyzed the variables he created and prepared appropriate countermeasures. Sizzle. Soon, all fires were extinguished. This placed Dmitry at a significant disadvantage. No matter how strong Roman Dmitry was, his army was small. Port Bell had as many as 30,000 troops stationed. It was different from massacring 10,000 troops at Rascal. As countless soldiers swarmed from all sides, even Dmitry's elite soldiers were bound to suffer casualties. However, unreal. How are we supposed to stop that monster? A monster was standing before them. They had no confidence to stop Roman Dmitry even at the cost of hundreds or thousands of lives. With overwhelming momentum that slaughtered those who charged, the soldiers of Port Bell were filled with fear. But just as the tide seemed to favor Roman Dmitry, his army began to retreat. Soon after, loud explosions erupted from the castle walls. Boom! 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 While Roman Dmitry drew the enemy's attention with blazing flames, his elites swiftly installed magic bombs on the walls. Typically, the internal and external strengths of castle walls differed. The outer walls, where enemies would infiltrate, were reinforced with powerful magical barriers. However, the interiors, assuming the walls had already been breached, lacked such thorough defenses. As a result, the castle walls crumbled with ease. With the walls of Port Bell collapsing around them, Roman Dmitry raised his voice above the chaos. Soldiers of Valhalla, hear me. If you remain in Port Bell even after the walls have fallen. He slashed at the pursuing enemies. Blood splattered everywhere, capturing the attention of the people. You will meet me here again without the protection of the walls. Roman Dmitri had already anticipated the enemy's defenses and countermeasures. Recognizing the true nature of rain shower, he set a different objective for the small-scale guerrilla operation. The strength of a fortress lies in its walls. If those walls were to collapse, even if Port Bell's forces remain intact, they would have no choice but to retreat to Santino. This would isolate Runos, allowing for the easy attack that struck at their blind spot. Unaware of this, Viscount Runos complacently reported to his superiors that Dmitri had abandoned the war. This caused the rear commanders to let down their guard. However, on the third day, Dmitri's army drew their weapons and headed toward Runos. Dmitri is advancing. Stop them. 3 days ago, Duke Vieto received a report of the series of events that occurred on the northern front. He really turned all these absurd plans into reality. He was astonished. Even though he proceeded with the rebellion, he didn't trust Dmitri blindly. Roman Dmitri's plan involved having Ares confront Albaraz and Caesar before moving his army to break through the northern front. For the people of Valhalla, they had to doubt the first part of the plan. While Ares was renowned as a genius swordsman, it was uncertain whether he could defeat Albaraz, let alone Caesar. Moreover, there were concerns about the northern front. They believed that as the foremost defensive positions were being dismantled, the rebel forces in Hernard would be at risk. But Roman Dmitri kept his word. Along with Ares's victory, they received a report that he had successfully captured the north. Sanchez said, "Didn't I tell you?" Even when the Valhalla royal family openly revealed their intent to assassinate him, Roman Dmitri confidently said he could return without any help. If he says it's possible, it means he has that much confidence. That's why I suggested we proceed with the rebellion, trusting him. Sanchez served as the vital link of trust. If he hadn't strongly advocated for action, the rebels might not have taken the decisive step to attack Hernard first. For now, they had passed the dangerous hurdle. With the Valhalla royal family in chaos, the role of the rebels was very important. Duke Vieto said, "There is only one way for us to bring down the Valhalla royal family. We must hold out in Hernard as long as possible and spread the word to the people about why we are rebelling. The longer we endure, the louder we raise our voices, the more the people of Valhalla will think that now is the perfect opportunity to set things right." Because of Roman Dmitri, the Valhalla royal family won't be able to focus all their efforts on suppressing the rebellion. If we can hold out here in Hernard for just 15 days, people who have been terrified will start to rise up and help us. They believed in the will of the Valhalla people. Right now, no one dared to move due to the fear instilled by the infamous emperor. But if the rebel forces showed clear achievements, the flames of rebellion would spread throughout the region. This was their primary goal. Therefore, they had to hold out, otherwise, they couldn't expect any miracles like uprisings. Somehow, we have to endure. Roman Dmitri has set the stage to this extent. We can't collapse after gaining the high ground. We must hold out for 15 days, that will be the turning point. As the dawn broke on the third day, Roman Dmitri attacked Runos. But beyond the walls of Hernard, the imperial army appeared. This is... How are we supposed to stop that? From the magnificent sight before them, some swallowed hard, while others let out sighs. The imperial army stretched across the landscape, densely packed and numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Sanchez spoke in a voice tinged with despair. It seems the information was true. The emperor really abandoned the north and brought all 1 million troops here to capture Hernard. And judging by the presence of the royal knights symbolized by the golden flags, it's clear that special units have also been deployed. Among the numerous flags, there was also the golden flag symbolizing the royal knights. The chicken game had begun. The Valhalla emperor had indeed made an extreme choice. He hadn't sent even a small support force to the north and focused on capturing Hernard. Duke Vieto stood atop the walls, gazing out at the approaching force. Emperor of Valhalla. Do you intend to suppress the rebellion before Dmitri can create any variables? Their intent was clear: the emperor was furious and humiliated. But with 200,000 troops, it's impossible to hold them off for long. Both quantitatively and qualitatively, they were overwhelmingly outmatched. Diego thought that they might not be able to hold out for even a week, let alone the 15 days he had planned. As the morning sun rose, the battle that would determine the fate of the rebel forces began. Chapter 355. Chicken Game. Part 3. Valhalla's approach was textbook. They deployed flares at the forefront, and dozens of siege weapons spewed fire simultaneously. Boom! 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 The sky was engulfed in flames. As the attack struck the fortress walls, magic barriers sprang to life. Flames scattered in all directions, and Hernard's soldiers looked up at the sky with tense expressions. They weren't sure how long the magic barriers would hold. But one thing was certain: the magic defenses wouldn't hold forever, and they weren't confident they could stop the million soldiers beyond the walls. On the first day, Valhalla focused on wearing down the fortress's defenses. They weren't in a hurry. No matter what kind of havoc Roman Dimitri's army caused, they were confident that the imperial army would achieve results faster. So they warmed up sufficiently but thoroughly. Count Gomez, Valhalla's commander, looked calmly at Hernard's walls. He could see the rebel mages working frantically to repair the magic barriers that had been bombarded by flares all day. 2 days later, a change occurred in Valhalla's camp. Mages. They even deployed the vagabond mages. One of Valhalla's magic towers had joined the fray. These were the wandering mages, famous for roaming battlefields and living without restraint. They were notorious for exerting a more significant influence on the battlefield than any other magic tower. They were one of the special forces Emperor Valhalla had mobilized. Without the Emperor's direct orders, the vagabond mages would never have answered the call. Lightning storm. Wind field. In an instant, the magic took form. A powerful blade of wind cut through the air, and the sky darkened as dozens of bolts of lightning erupted from the swirling black clouds. Large explosions followed one after another. The vagabond mages continuously cast spells, while the flares kept firing flames. Countless bursts of magic pounded fiercely against the walls. The rebel mages didn't stand idle. Some defended with magic barriers, while others launched counterattacks with offensive spells. They even tried to retaliate using ballistae from behind the walls. But despite their efforts, they couldn't completely block Valhalla's attacks. The difference in power was simply too great. Moreover, Hernard's walls were already severely damaged. The rebels had occupied it once, and the imperial army had attacked afterward, so no amount of repair could restore it completely. The rebel soldiers began to show signs of anxiety. If the magic barriers of the walls were breached within 3 days, there was no telling how long they could hold out in the melee combat that would follow. In the end, part of the wall collapsed. It was unable to withstand the relentless barrage. Count Gomez, watching the situation intently, didn't miss the moment the wall began to crumble. Without hesitation, he gave the order to attack. Advance all troops. Exterminate all these heinous traitors. Charge. The imperial army charged forward. The sight of 1 million soldiers advancing was truly spectacular. They raised their shields, forming a barrier against the sky to prepare for ranged attacks. From atop the walls, countless arrows rained down. Some pierced through the shields, striking the soldiers behind, but they couldn't stop the imperial army from reaching the front lines. Clack clack clack. Ladders were set against the walls. As enemies began climbing up one after another, Duke Vieto shouted, "Stop them! Use any means necessary to hold them back. If we fall, Valhalla's future ends." His voice was filled with desperation. Despite his rallying cry, the situation remained bleak. The sun was setting. In the place where a storm of death had passed, rebel soldiers lay scattered in miserable states across the walls. They had spent the first 2 days primarily defending against magical attacks, yet, after facing the imperial army for the first time, they had already suffered devastating losses. Seeing Duke Vieto drenched in blood, Sanchez carefully approached and spoke. "We still need to confirm the exact numbers, but we estimate we've lost about 50,000 troops. The Imperial Army suffered around twice that, but the problem is they still have around 900,000 soldiers remaining. Your Grace, at this rate, it's only a matter of time before Hernard falls." "I suppose so. From the moment the Emperor gathered his forces here in Hernard, we had no chance of victory." It was a grim situation. Duke Vieto glanced around with hollow eyes. 50,000 soldiers, those who had once raised their voices to follow him, had become dead in just a single day. Perhaps this would be his fate as well. Even with Roman Dimitri's strength, opposing an emperor who wielded absolute power was reckless. He knew the risk and still drew his sword. Death never fazed him, even as it loomed right in front of him. The only consolation is that Roman Dimitri has already taken down Runos and Port Bell. It was good news, but there was only so much they could do in a few days. The rebels in Hernard couldn't guarantee how long they'd last. Even if Dimitri's army captured Santino, took over the warp gates, and threatened the Valhalla royal family, success still wasn't certain. Therefore, it was up to the rebels to bear the burden. Roman Dimitri was fighting his own battle, but they didn't have the luxury to worry about him now. Duke Vieto spoke. "Perhaps from the start, we risked our lives in an impossible fight. I'm sorry to Roman Dimitri, but I don't think he can achieve anything that would change Hernard's fate in just a few days. We'll probably all die here. Just because we raised our voice for Valhalla, we'll be branded as rebels. Even in death, our bodies will be trampled and humiliated." It was expected. But the desperate situation forced the harsh reality upon him. "But the fact that we are right doesn't change. We'll fight to the end. Even if the rebels all die here in Hernard, we'll plant the seed of Valhalla's spirit in the hearts of its people. One day, someone who inherits Valhalla's soul will rise and carry on its will." In his wretched state, the Duke clenched his fist. He had accepted that the rebellion had failed. Dimitri's allied forces had taken down Runos and Port Bell in just 3 days. By marching day and night, they reached Santino on the 6th day. With 1 day remaining in the week, Roman Dimitri chose to let his forces rest instead of pushing them any further. The next day, they moved their forces. After positioning themselves a short distance from the walls, Roman Dimitri slowly headed toward Santino's fortress. As he approached the towering walls, he stopped. The soldiers watched in silence, waiting for his next move. Then, with countless eyes locked on him, he spoke. "I am Roman Dimitri of the Kingdom of Dimitri. I challenge the Lord of Santino to a duelist tourney." The top of the wall buzzed with murmurs. It was natural. A duelist tourney meant relying on individual prowess, but no one in Santino could face him. In fact, no one in Valhalla could match him. After all, Ares had defeated both Alvarez and Caesar. Who could possibly stand a chance against Roman Dimitri, who was clearly superior to them? It was obviously a disadvantageous fight for Valhalla. Count Santino appeared atop the wall and spoke in a firm voice. "I refuse. I see through your filthy intentions. Why should we accept such a proposal?" Hernard was on the brink of collapse. With the battle likely to be decided in 2 or 3 days, they had no intention of falling into Roman Dimitri's trap. Besides, Santino had received reinforcements from Port Bell. Thanks to Dimitri capturing Port Bell first, Santino now had even more troops than before. They had also gathered intelligence about the enemy's intentions to use dispel magic and prepared countermeasures. Roman Dimitri laughed. "What a pity. I heard that Valhalla was once a nation of warriors who didn't avoid battles, regardless of the outcome. Now you've degenerated into a country where calculating gains is natural. How about this, then? Be it 10, be it 100, I'll accept any number of challengers. If you open the gates and face me, I won't back down from here." It was a blatant taunt. The response? A predictable silence. They knew that continuing this conversation would only drag Valhalla's pride through the mud. Well, if that's how it's going to be. Swoosh. Roman Dimitri pulled something from his cloak. Then, Shwa. I'll come to you. It was a magic scroll. As it shone brightly, wings unfolded behind Roman Dmitri. Fly. Using flight magic, Roman Dmitri rose into the sky. Valhalla had cast spells to make the outer walls slippery, preventing them from being used as footholds. This precaution was based on intel that Ares had once climbed walls using daggers. Moreover, Santino's walls were high, making it impossible to leap over in one go. But no one had anticipated that Roman Dmitri would simply fly. Count Santino shouted frantically, "Stop him! Roman Dmitri must not enter the fortress." The soldiers fired arrows from all directions, quickly filling the air around Roman Dmitri. Yet, their efforts proved futile. Fire shield. Whoosh. Flames rose, forming a barrier around him. The arrows turned to ashes, and Roman Dmitri continued his ascent without slowing. It was as if he had anticipated their response all along. Then, Santino's mages stepped forward. Their mana surged, intent on shooting him down. But the outcome was the same. Mages from the Phoenix Magic Tower and the Hector Kingdom shielded Roman Dmitri, intercepting the incoming attacks with dispel and defensive magic. In no time, Roman Dmitri reached the walls. It was an absurd situation. The Allied forces were desperately trying to help one man reach the top, while others frantically tried to stop him. Normally, such tactics would be futile, but with Roman Dmitri, the story was entirely different. If he gets on top of the walls, it's over. Beyond the border, they had heard rumors of the overwhelming power Roman Dmitri wielded. Now, they realized the duelist tourney was just a distraction. He had predicted they would refuse and used it as an excuse to get closer to the walls. Even if they had accepted, he would have gained the upper hand regardless. No one had foreseen this. If they had known in advance, they could have prepared countermeasures. "Stop him, stop him!" Count Santino shouted. The mages unleashed all their power in a concentrated attack. They finally broke through the magic defenses, but Roman Dmitri deflected them effortlessly with his sword. The fly spell granted flight, but it didn't hinder one's combat abilities. And with the forces at Santino's disposal, there was no way to bring him down. In the end, Roman Dmitri landed atop the wall with a light tap. Then, voices filled with rage erupted. "Attack! Kill him!" Santino's soldiers, eyes blazing, swarmed toward him like a mass of enraged bees. It was a sight to behold. Using flight magic for a siege had once been a classic tactic. But it quickly fell out of favor since landing atop a wall didn't guarantee survival, unless you were Roman Dmitri. Slash. Arg. Soldiers fell with one swoop, blood spraying in all directions. After slaughtering dozens in an instant, Roman Dmitri calmly looked up at Count Santino and smiled. "Contact the Valhalla royal family immediately. Tell them Santino is in danger." At that chilling sight, Count Santino frantically reached for the magic telegram. Chapter 356. Chicken Game. Part 4. On top of the fortress wall, an unreal scene was unfolding. One man stood against countless enemies. Attacks came from every direction, leaving no blind spots. Yet, Roman Dmitri was cutting down Santino's soldiers one after another with ease. Despite being vastly outnumbered on enemy ground, he moved as if taking a leisurely walk through his own backyard. Count Santino felt his hands trembling. So this is Roman Dmitri. He truly lives up to his reputation. Seeing him execute such an outrageous plan showed what kind of person he was. It wasn't mere bravado. He genuinely believed he could turn the tide of battle with his strength alone. And after witnessing this overwhelming power firsthand, Count Santino had no choice but to reach for the magic telegram. It was a gut-wrenching feeling as a commander. But if he stubbornly tried to hold out with only Santino's forces, he knew things would likely go terribly wrong. Beep. Marquis Belfer, this is Count Santino. What's the matter? Roman Dmitri is. Ah. Boom. An explosion rocked the fortress. Startled by the sound, Count Santino turned and saw Roman Dmitri charging toward him. The monster moved with ease, swiftly cutting down every soldier in his path. Since the distance between them was considerable, they didn't immediately clash. However, seeing the knights who stepped forward to stop Roman Dmitri fall one after another, Count Santino unconsciously let out a scream and fell to the ground. His heart pounded and his mouth went dry. Panicking, he scrambled to pick up the magic telegram again. Our Roman Dmitri used flight magic to land atop the fortress wall by himself. Now, Santino's soldiers are being massacred. We can't stop him. We need reinforcements. It may sound absurd, but if we can't stop Roman Dmitri, the fortress will be breached. He screamed as if he were dying. Still, it was only the early stages of the battle. The fortress walls and gates remained intact, and Santino's soldiers were still numerous. But Count Santino, who had roamed countless battlefields, instinctively knew that Santino was in danger. Everyone who underestimated Roman Dmitri had perished so far. So, even though he knew that contacting Marquis Belfer might seem premature, he desperately reached out to save his own life. Count Santino. Yes. The opponent is just one man. I never expected much from you. Just hold out for a few days. I don't care whether you drive Santino's soldiers into a death trap or use some other method. Do whatever it takes to hold out. Reinforcements will arrive after we finish dealing with Hernard. But still, don't test my patience with your incompetence any further. It was a harsh, unwavering voice. Count Santino's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger, but he couldn't express his anger toward Marquis Belfer, the most powerful figure in Valhalla. Though he felt humiliated, he couldn't bring himself to disconnect the magic telegram. Yet, no words came to mind to persuade Marquis Belfer. At that moment, Roman Dmitri turned toward the castle gate. If that gate opens, it would spell real disaster. Santino's knights charged all at once to block him. Their dazzling auras flashing from all directions assaulted his senses. It was an incredible sight. No matter how formidable he is, blocking the attack of 30 knights all at once would be nearly impossible. Normally, Count Santino would have disconnected the magic telegram with Marquis Belfer, if his opponent had acted within the bounds of common sense. Stab. Slash. Swoosh. Arg. It was a one-sided massacre. Roman Dmitri blocked, dodged, and counterattacked. In a series of fluid, intertwined exchanges, he swept through Santino's knights with overwhelming dominance. How many times did I blink? How could they be slaughtered in an instant? Seized by a sudden fear that overtook reason, Count Santino shouted into the telegram like a madman. Our Roman Dmitri is a monster. How can you expect Santino's forces alone to stop such a monster? This was madness from the start. Roman Dmitri is turning Valhalla's territory into a wasteland, and you want us to stop him with our lives? Please, I beg you. Send reinforcements. His voice was filled with desperation. He needed help to survive. He clung to a sliver of hope that, even if reinforcements were sent now, they might be able to face Roman Dmitri. But a cold voice rang from the magic telegram. Die for Valhalla, Count Santino. With those final words, the magic telegram disconnected. In just 3 hours, Santino's towering fortress walls fell. Once Roman Dmitri forced the castle gate open, the advancing Allied forces initiated a one-sided massacre. Already at a disadvantage in strength, and with their morale shattered, the situation turned hopeless. As defeat spread rapidly, Santino's soldiers surrendered without much resistance. Ugh! With a heavy thud, Count Santino was thrown to the ground. Groaning as he rolled a few times, he quickly knelt, trembling under the cold gaze fixed upon him. Please, spare me just this once. If you save me, I'll do anything for you, Lord Roman Dmitri, he pleaded, his voice desperate. Raising his eyes slightly, he glanced at his opponent, Roman Dmitri, the demon of Dmitri. Because of him, all conventional strategies had been rendered useless. And now, Santino's fate lay in his hands. Count Santino hadn't intended to commit treason from the start. He had always considered himself a patriot. But with his life hanging by a thread, he couldn't afford to worry about such things. He recalled Marquis Belfer's order. Telling him to die for Valhalla ignited rebellion in his heart. "What can you do for me?" It was a cold voice. But Count Santino saw it as an opportunity. Thinking he was given a chance to speak, he looked at Roman Dmitri and raised his voice. I can do anything. First, I can provide information about the warp gates. Your strategy is likely to seize them to pressure the Valhalla imperial family, but the Javier warp point isn't easy to breach. I can tell you about the troop deployments and security systems there. In response, he was met with silence. Growing increasingly desperate, he hurriedly added more words. That's not all. I will also tell you about the Emperor's special forces, and about Marquis Belfer, who currently leads Valhalla's power. I understand that you might find me untrustworthy. But if you accept an insider like myself, I am confident that I can be of great help in bringing down the Valhalla Empire. Explain in detail. Thank you. Count Santino's expression brightened. He believed he had been accepted. Desperate to prove his worth, he eagerly spilled out everything he knew. To survive, he scraped together every bit of information, emphasizing his value as an asset. When he finally finished, Count Santino looked at Roman Dmitri with a hopeful expression. Now, will you spare me? Just as he said, Roman Dmitri thought Count Santino was a useful asset. But that was all he was, just a tool. No. From the beginning, he had no intention of letting his enemy live. Around that same moment, something unusual was happening in Marin, the capital of Valhalla. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. Let's go to the Valhalla Imperial Palace. We can no longer watch Valhalla go down the wrong path. For Valhalla. The common people had risen. Ares's words had ignited the soul of Valhalla, and within days, a wave of patriotism brought everyone together. At first, it started with just a few hundred. But as their voices grew louder, the numbers quickly surged into thousands, then tens of thousands. Soon, the crowd marching toward the Valhalla Imperial Palace became massive. It was exactly as Duke Vieto had planned. In this rebellion, public sentiment was crucial, and the actions of the rebel army gave the people the confidence they needed. Rise up. Raise your voices. Just as Duke Vieto's rebel army risks their lives on the battlefield, we, the people of Valhalla, must do our part as well. Public sentiment spread like wildfire, and crowds soon gathered in front of the imperial palace. A figure, seemingly their representative, stepped forward and raised his voice. On behalf of the people of Valhalla, I address His Majesty the Emperor. Valhalla is a nation of warriors. For generations, we have lived with pride, never once feeling shame in being warriors. We have upheld the warrior's code with unwavering courage. But in recent years, Valhalla has lost its way, its spirit. You invited us to a sacred festival, only to tarnish it with your assassination attempt. Instead of seizing power through warrior bravery, the Emperor of Valhalla now relies on cunning and deceitful tactics. Your Majesty, this is wrong. Please set things right and become the wise ruler who earns the people's support. Become a wise ruler. Restore the foundations of Valhalla. Everyone raised their voices in unison. It was an incredible sight, a bold act of defiance in a country where the emperor ruled as a dictator. For the common people to openly oppose him was unimaginable. As tension mounted, an armed force appeared before the crowd. It was the emperor's soldiers, swiftly moving to encircle the civilians. Despite the growing tension, the people's representative stood firm, refusing to back down. Then kill us. Silence us with death. If you try to stop those who stand for Valhalla with death, all of Valhalla will rise against you. Those who carry the spirit of Valhalla will be enraged by our deaths, and only then will you realize that the people are the foundation upon which this nation stands. Tens of thousands stood there. Dealing with them was not a simple task. Just as the representative had warned, the situation could easily escalate into something far worse. If they had acted sooner, things might have been different. But now, with such a massive crowd, silencing them with death was beyond reason. But then... Stab. Arg. One of the Emperor's soldiers thrusted a spear into a civilian without hesitation. Blood spread across the man's abdomen, and he stared wide-eyed at his attacker. The commander leading the soldiers shouted sharply, "Annihilate these heinous rebels! Kill them all!" It was nothing like they had expected. There was no room for negotiation. The Emperor's soldiers rushed in to slaughter the crowd. The unarmed commoners could do nothing but fall, helpless against the onslaught. It was a one-sided massacre. Bloodshed erupted as the heads of those who had raised their voices moments earlier flew off. Others were pierced in the abdomen and collapsed to the ground. Horrific screams echoed all around. The representative watched in disbelief, his face frozen in shock. He hadn't anticipated this. No matter how ruthless the Emperor of Valhalla was, he never thought he would massacre tens of thousands of his own people in such a manner. Emperor of Valhalla, you've gone mad with power. No matter how great an empire you build, if you treat your people worse than livestock, how long do you think your reign will last? The people of Valhalla will witness our deaths and suffering with their own eyes. So. Arg. Thud. A powerful blow struck the representative's leg, forcing him to kneel. Another hit landed on his face, and he spat out blood as his vision blurred. Fading in and out of consciousness, he felt someone grab his hair and yank him up. Through the haze, he glimpsed at his attacker. "See, Captain of the Guard?" The captain of Marin's guard was looking at him with a fierce face. "This isn't right. You all know well that Valhalla is heading in the wrong direction." The representative spoke with difficulty. But the captain laughed. "We only follow His Majesty the Emperor's orders." Stab. He drove his sword into the representative's heart. The man's body trembled before finally going limp. With a cold, sweeping gaze, the captain raised his sword high and shouted, "Kill them all. Leave not a single one alive who dares challenge His Majesty's authority." Upon hearing the series of events, Marquis Belfer's expression grew grim. "We have dealt with all the commoners involved in the rebellion. And as per your orders, we will proceed with identifying those associated with them." Even Marquis Belfer felt guilt over the massacre. Public sentiment was crucial. A nation, after all, was ultimately formed by its people. Throughout the continent's history, no leader had ever responded with such extreme measures. If they had at least presented a plausible justification and dealt with the rebels discreetly, he might have understood the Emperor's actions. But the blatant massacre left Marquis Belfer at a loss for words. The Emperor of Valhalla laughed. Those insignificant worms. They got what they deserved for not knowing their place. No one could offer him counsel, not the royal knights, nor Marin's guard. All other special forces were the Emperor's men. No matter how much madness the Valhalla Emperor displayed, none withdrew their support. Roman Dmitri, Duke Vieto. They are under a great delusion. They believe that by stirring up the people of Valhalla, they might achieve something. Even though they are clearly outmatched in actual power, they think they have a chance by inciting the masses. Such foolish thinking. My brothers who tried to stand against me also placed their faith in public sentiment, and they couldn't escape death overnight. The Emperor sneered. His madness intensified. Every time he heard news of Roman Dmitri, an unbearable urge welled up within him. Marquis Belfer. Yes. The Emperor of Valhalla knew it was time for him to take action. He had no intention of backing down in this chicken game with Roman Dmitri. Contact Roman Dmitri immediately. Understood. Shortly after, Marquis Belfer brought forth a magic telegram. With a beep, it displayed Roman Dmitri on the screen. He was sitting atop a pile of corpses, his face smeared with blood. It's a truly delightful sight, isn't it, Marquis Belfer? Chapter 357. Chicken Game. Part 5. The Valhalla Emperor burst into laughter. "Ha ha ha, amazing! Truly amazing. It had only been a few hours since Count Santino requested reinforcements. In that short time, Santino had been reduced to a wasteland. The Valhalla Emperor couldn't help but be genuinely impressed. Roman Dmitri, I've never encountered anyone like you in my life. Many have shown hostility toward Valhalla, but none have proven themselves with results. You give me no choice but to acknowledge you. Perhaps you are more suited to be a Valhalla warrior than my incompetent siblings who died without accomplishing anything. He couldn't contain his laughter. His once lazy eyes now gleamed, as though he had just spotted intriguing prey. He finds this situation amusing, huh? How amusing, very amusing. You must have thought this, Runos, Port Bell, Santino. If you quickly take over these three places, Valhalla would withdraw troops in the face of a threat to Javier, which has a warp gate. Honestly, your plan is utterly absurd. I thought it was impossible to bring down Santino before Hernard fell, yet you've made the impossible a reality. Beyond the screen, Roman Dmitri sat on a pile of corpses as a chair, gazing at the Valhalla Emperor. Unable to contain the fury boiling inside him at such arrogance, the Valhalla Emperor continued. But there's something you're gravely mistaken about. You think Valhalla can't afford to give up the warp gate. No, more precisely, you assume we'll stick to standard tactics. Roman Dmitri, I truly acknowledge you. Unlike those outdated fools who call themselves warriors, you know how to win wars like a true hunter. That's why I have no choice but to give everything I have to defeat you. He leaned in closer to the screen. A glint of madness shimmered in his eyes. The warp gate in Javier has already been destroyed. Even if you capture Javier, you can't threaten us anymore. So, what do you plan to do now? Now that we've abandoned the warp gate at great cost, what can Dmitri possibly do before Hernard falls? I hope you won't spout romantic notions about turning the tide by using Valhalla's public sentiment. I've already beheaded everyone who babbled such nonsense. He chuckled slyly, savoring the situation. The Valhalla Emperor had not studied tactics. But being born of royal blood, he knew well how to leverage the overwhelming position of the Valhalla Empire. Valhalla had always been in a position of strength. To win, rather than clever strategies, it was better to choose options that would leave the weaker opponent with no good options. Dmitri's goal was clear: the rebellion's counterattack. To create a scenario where they could take control of the situation, Dmitri boldly pushed his forces in to draw the Valhalla royal family's attention. They wanted to prevent Valhalla from focusing their troops on Hernard. Normally, Valhalla would try to minimize damage, but the Valhalla Emperor focused on the core issue. Whether Dmitri rampaged or not, he attacked Hernard. He killed everyone who clamored for public sentiment and destroyed the warp gates to prevent any possibility of Dmitri reaching the Valhalla royal family. In that case, although there would be damage, all of Dmitri's options were blocked. In this game of chicken where they rushed at each other, the Valhalla Emperor simply chose to ram into his opponent. Roman Dmitri. On the day Dmitri falls, I will personally visit you. I want to see the face of the demon of Dmitri stained with defeat, despair, and regret. I'm truly looking forward to that day. The communication was cut off. It was as if the Valhalla Emperor was saying he would wait for Roman Dmitri's response through actions, not words. 2 days later, the Allied forces reached Javier. Valhalla's warp point was not far away, and the gates that had been firmly closed just days ago were now wide open as if welcoming Roman Dmitri. Their entry was unopposed. Upon entering, Chris busily moved around, assessing the surroundings. It wasn't long before he reported back, his expression grim. It's as the Valhalla Emperor said. The warp gate has been completely destroyed beyond repair, and it seems the forces in Javier have already withdrawn. We've confirmed that there are no traps like magic bombs. The destruction of the warp gate was a bold move. Warp gates, being magical constructs, required immense manpower and resources to install. Previously, the warp gate Hector installed for war was only a lower grade. But the warp gate here in Javier was a top grade that could transport hundreds of thousands of troops at once. Destroying it meant astronomical losses for Valhalla. Moreover, fully restoring it would take considerable time. With few warp gates left in the north, this decision severely limited their strategic options. Yet, despite these consequences, they made a drastic decision that seemed irrational with Hernard's capture on the horizon. The Valhalla Emperor's true disposition was revealed. There were surely other options, but like a cat playing with a mouse, he chose the most extreme course of action. The reason was simple: he was more drawn to this method. As Dmitri advanced without backing down, the Emperor stepped forward like a matador waving a red cloth. He signaled his readiness to face the confrontation head-on. Chris spoke up. "It seems there's no way to help Hernard. There are 2 more warp points in the north besides Javier, but Hernard will inevitably fall as we move to those places. Moreover, if we take too long, our retreat might be cut off. Commander, we must withdraw our forces now." After sharing his thoughts, Chris stepped back. He believed there was no need to press any further. However, Roman Dmitri smiled and said, "Interesting." At Hernard, the magic barrier they repaired overnight shattered like a broken glass. It couldn't withstand the barrage of flares that decorated the sky. "Advance. Today, we'll wipe out the rebels once and for all." With its collapse, hell was unleashed. Clank, clank, clank. Ladders were placed against the walls. At first, the rebels had actively resisted by pouring boiling oil and such. But now, due to depleted supplies, all they could do was stab with their weapons. They had even run out of arrows. As the walls quickly swarmed with the Imperial soldiers, the rebels gritted their teeth and struggled desperately. Die. Stab. A rebel soldier thrust his spear with all his might. He managed to kill an Imperial soldier with a surprise attack, but he couldn't survive the attacks coming from all sides. He was quickly hacked to pieces. "How dare you, scum!" On the wall, Duke Vieto was covered in blood. He charged at the Imperial soldiers, slaughtering them in a rampage. "Stop, Duke Vieto, Gah! Ag!" With a single swing, his halberd cut down several Imperial soldiers at once. Not stopping there, Duke Vieto swung again and again, slashing, cutting, and slicing, scattering the enemy's blood. Yet, no matter how many he killed, the Imperial soldiers before him seemed endless. So it all ends today. 10 days. They had held out for 10 days. Truthfully, they had reached their limit on the 6th day of battle. In fact, it was a miracle they had held out this long. Despite the overwhelming difference in power and several crises, the rebels risked their lives to hold on somehow. Even the commoners of Hernard joined in, carrying supplies or fighting with crude farming tools. But such forces were no match for the Imperial army. In the end, most of them died. With less than 50,000 troops remaining, Duke Vieto knew they could no longer hold out. "Valhalla, how far have you fallen?" A few days ago, he heard news from Marin. The people of Valhalla finally responded to the rebels' call, but the Valhalla Emperor showed a shocking response by killing them all. It was a bewildering situation. He knew the Valhalla Emperor was a cruel person, but he didn't expect him to outright murder everyone. The overwhelming terror forcibly crushed the public sentiment that was about to rise. And Dimitri's situation was not good either. With the news that the warp gate in Javier was destroyed, even the slightest hope he held on to vanished. "Valhalla Emperor, you are truly ruthless." The rebels were essentially driven to the edge of a cliff. Roman Dmitri had made truly remarkable moves that had to be acknowledged, but the Valhalla Emperor's irrational decisions didn't allow any reversal. Duke Vieto had no regrets about dying. However, he despaired at the fact that Valhalla could not change and felt sorry for Roman Dmitri, who would have to bear the responsibility of defeat. Swoosh! He beheaded a royal knight and stepped over the corpses surrounding him. After exhaling heavily, Duke Vieto shouted, "All right. Come on. Even if I die here, I won't turn my back on you." He could sense it. After today, his tumultuous life would come to an end. Looking at the walls of Hernard which had turned into hell, Count Gomez showed a pale expression. Persistent bastards. 10 days, it took longer than expected. Initially, they thought they could bring down Hernard in 7 or 8 days, but the rebels' resistance was extremely fierce. Adding to the problem were the civilians who joined the fight. Though not strong individually, their growing numbers made it impossible to bring down Hernard quickly. So, they chose to gradually wear the enemy down. After a long and grueling struggle, the rebellion was finally nearing its end. Once the rebels are dealt with, Roman Dmitri will have no options left. Duke Vieto is truly an incomprehensible person. When His Majesty, the Emperor of Valhalla, took the throne, Duke Vieto could have used the opportunity to secure his position and live in luxury. TSK, why did he bring about his own death with such a poor choice? How foolish. But thanks to him, others can take his seat. Hernard should fall within 3 to 4 hours. As Count Gomez watched the situation with a relaxed face, he noticed a light flashing on his magic telegram. It was a red light, signaling urgency. He answered the call with a serious face. Beep. What's the matter? Count Gomez. Immediately withdraw your forces. He heard the voice of Marquis Belfer from the other side of the magic telegram. Frowning, Count Gomez spoke in a tone of disbelief. What on earth are you talking about? The goal is right before our eyes. If we push a little more, we can capture Hernard. We can't withdraw our troops now. If we do that, the rebels might revive. Hey, you bastard! Listen to me carefully. Marquis Belfer suddenly shouted, his anger palpable even through the magic telegram. It's an order from His Majesty. If you don't want to be dragged to the gallows and hanged, withdraw your troops immediately. An order to retreat. Count Gomez looked down at the magic telegram with a bewildered face.